Brian Kaplan. I'm editor of the Banker magazine. I'm here with Silvia Pavoni, who's the investment editor. And Silvia is in charge of our Latin American coverage. And we try as far as possible to make sure that we visit all the countries in Latin America over the course of a few months. And obviously we go to the major places like Brazil and Mexico. But Silvia, you've just come back from Peru, which is a country that doesn't always get that much attention from the international press. How are things there, and what sort of aftermath have they had from the financial crisis?
Well, if Peru hasn't got much attention from the international press, it certainly got a lot of attention from the investor community. In fact, many analysts are now describing Peru as being in a growth league of its own. It had fantastic economic growth. In 2008, they registered something like 10% economic expansion. And they managed to grow even during 2009, which is when the effects of the financial crisis hit the country, and that was by 1%. There are very good prospects for 2010 in terms of economic growth. Again, the estimates have it growing at between 5.5% and 7%. The only difficulty there is that, of course, it could run into the problem of overheating, but the government seems to be well aware of it, and turning down the expansionary fiscal policy that they introduced to help with the crisis.
And I gather there's been quite a bit of excitement about a Peruvian fishing company that decided to issue on the international markets, which is quite unusual. Eh?
Definitely unusual, and it got the...
Is fishing the big business in Peru?
It is, in fact, yeah. Yes. It is a really big sector. It is becoming even bigger. It's one of the largest exporters in that field, and producers rather. And this issue by Copa Inca, a fishing company, as I said, took place at the beginning of the year. It was $175 million on the international capital markets. And it was priced to yield over 9%, which is a really, really nice return. Yeah. There was a lot of interest from particularly US investors. And it is believed that this will pave the way for other Peruvian issuers to go to the international capital markets. And in fact, that was the first time since 2007 that a high yield was placed on the international capital markets.
Okay, and what about the banking sector in Peru? I mean, is there a lot of opportunities to grow banking services there? Presumably not every Peruvian has as many bank accounts and savings products and mortgages Sure. and so forth as the average person does in Europe or the States.
Well, Peru is still, of course, a very poor country. So although the poverty levels went down from 50% a few years ago to 35% now, according to official figures, the level of bancarization, of course, can still majorly be improved. But banks have been benefiting by the economic growth, and they are expanding their strategies to acquire new customers and to release new products, both for retail and for corporates. So we can expect some nice, although possibly paced developments from Peru.
Okay, now as well as visiting Peru, I mean, you also visited Argentina, which is obviously one of the major economies of Latin America. But unlike Brazil and Mexico, where the reform process has been very successful and we're seeing the benefits of that, Argentina has really had a bit of a difficulty, I think, with its reforms. And we had the default in 2001. Then we've had more recently the whole saga over the resignation of the central bank governor. Yes. And more recently, we're getting the debt exchange. I mean, how far do you think Argentina is now on in terms of working out its relationship with the international investment community?
Well, that's an interesting question. In fact, a banker, when I was there, did say that Argentina's problems are not economical, they're political.
Yeah.
So it seems that there still is an attraction by Argentinian politicians towards perhaps a little bit of drama.
Yes, and populism, yeah.
Yes, and the latest controversy with the central bank over some reserves funds that the government wanted to use to help repay their debt, which led then to the resignation of the central governor. In that case, some bankers actually feared that some of their customers would switch to dollars, which is what Argentinians tend to do when there is a problem. So when they feel that the economic situation is going to be unstable or that the political situation is going to be unstable, they run towards dollars. And luckily that didn't happen, because the discussions the tension between government and the central bank didn't go as far as creating a political crisis, so bankers were reassured.
All right, so it seems like we've got some way to go in terms of the investment environment generally. But how are the banks managing? I mean, they still have to carry on their day-to-day business, whether things are good or things are bad, or whether the investment environment is good or bad. So, and they still have to carry on working with their customers. I mean, what are the bankers telling you in Argentina?
Well, they're still doing relatively well, actually, despite the many political issues and some, of course, economic issues. Argentina was hit by the crisis, by the effects of the international crisis anyway in 2009. But they're still actually coming out of that year with some interesting results. Even if we look at Banco Galicia, for example, which is a bank that is highly present in the agro business, and Argentina suffered as a consequence of a really strong drought in 2009. So Banco Galicia, which of course affected crops and farming and agriculture. Yeah. So Banco Galicia got a little hit by that, but they still managed to close the year in profits, and the products for that sector are going strong. And
there's a number of foreign banks that are invested in Argentina, yes, including the big Spanish banks. How are their operations performing?
They're all doing relatively well. There isn't so much differentiation between those players, so the Santander, BBVA, and also Banco Galicia. So they're all trying to get a higher market share by either expanding organically or trying to acquire someone else's branch networks, which is quite hard to do. So they all try to go after smaller lenders, or try to get business away from the big state lenders, which is quite difficult because they own a big share of the market, but they don't necessarily offer all the products that the private banks can offer. So that's their strategy.
Okay, well, we'll be carrying the reports that Silvia Pavoni writes about Peru and Argentina in the July issue of The Banker, which is also the issue with the top 1,000 bank ranking. And then she'll be visiting Paraguay over the next few weeks in order to write a major report for our September issue, which is the IMF issue. So we'll look forward to reading your report, Silvia, on Latin America in the months ahead.